Yep, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No melalona o I Aotearoa, he harangi, tuarua aho, I mahi ana o ki te harenga waka, ko Peter Connolly toku ingoa. Greetings to you all. My name is Peter Connolly. I'm a landscape architect and an urban designer from Melbourne, Australia. I'm also an associate professor of landscape architecture here at the School of Architecture at Victoria University. I'll be the MC for the evening. I would firstly like to thank Fernando, the Spanish ambassador, for his opening remarks in the atrium and for generously supporting this event, including the wonderful Spanish wine and nibbles. Hopefully you had some. Thank you, Fernando. This event has also been supported by the School of Architecture, who have provided the venue, various technologies, and generous human assistance. So firstly, some housekeeping. Firstly, turn your mobile phones off. Salvador will be presenting from Barcelona in Spanish. For those in the room, his words will be simultaneously translated into English. This is a bit of a freak out for us when we had to try and work out how to do this. But luckily, we've got some really good help. For those who are attending this event remotely, you can choose if you want to listen in Spanish or English. To choose which language you wish to listen to, go to the bottom right-hand side of your Zoom screen and click on the translation globe icon. Fernando mentioned about Barcelona reinventing itself. I first became really interested in Barcelona's approach to the city, as did many around the world, when the city, under the direction of the Director of Planning, Aurelio Bohigas, produced 160 built public spaces in 6 years, and then many more before the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. Bohigas' famous principle was projects, not plans. This refreshing attitude and the creation of many inspiring built urban spaces was in marked contrast to the rest of the world, which was much more comfortable producing planning documents one after the other. I spent one semester in 1991 in Europe, just before the Olympics, with a group of students based in our Barcelona studio, with a particular focus on closely examining what was happening there. The decision to just get on and do things through built work was not just inspiring. The more we learned about their approach, the more we realized that Barcelona and its designers were collectively learning through producing these projects, one after the other. Designing, building, evaluating, learning, designing some more. This involved very vigorous ongoing discussion in the city and across the world, learning through trial and error, learning through doing. I'm now starting to understand the ecosystemic urbanism idea and the superblock ideas of Salvador Rueda and his colleagues, but it seems it seems like the long-term exploration of these ideas in Barcelona and other cities in the world also involves such experimentation with the real world. With that thought, I will now take the pleasure to introduce Ivan from Urban Hub Aotearoa, who will introduce Salvador, our speaker for the evening. There'll be time for questions at the end.
Thank you, Peter, for that lovely introduction. Kanui te mihi kia koutou katoa, ko Ivan toku ingoa, no pani o rau, kei te whanganui atara inaiane. Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining our international series webinar tonight. First of all, I would like to thank our host, the Victoria University of Wellington, and our partner, the Embassy of Spain in New Zealand, for their support. Tonight, we'll be using an interpreter to make sure our guest's message is well heard and understood. My name is Ivan Santamarina, and I'm a co-founder with Leandro tonight of Urban Hub. We are a local consultancy and research group of urbanists. But what is an urbanist? According to sociologist Richard Sennett, an urbanist is a professional who has a distinctive understanding of cities. The word urbanism and urbanist appear because the conditions of modern life demanded a distinctive understanding of cities. We demand urbanists. Hardly anyone in New Zealand uses that word. It was the Spanish urbanist Ildefonso Cerdà, designer of the Barcelona master plan, who first brought this word into print. At Urban Hub, we have built a collaborative bridge between Aotearoa and Barcelona. Tonight, Salvador Rueda will talk to us about ecology, city making, sustainable urban models, proximity, urban mobility, and about his views on Wellington. As much as we love joining the dots and sharing experiences of international webinars, we want to work with our decision makers in implementing sustainable urban models for our cities. Next slide. Yeah, this is a tweet from our minister, the transport minister, last week, and there's two important sentences here that gave me hope. And as you can see, I retweeted it. So it is time to open up our city centers to people. It is increasingly mainstream internationally, and we need to catch up. I think it's a great example of the leadership we need now. Our guest speaker tonight, Salvador Rueda, sure knows how to make that happen. I feel honored to introduce our guest tonight. I have watched Salvador Rueda become more and more relevant over the years. And today, he's one of the world's eminent urban ecologists. He's the president and director of the Urban and Territorial Ecology Foundation. He was the director of the Barcelona Urban Ecology Agency for 20 years. He conceived the world-renowned ecosystemic urbanism concept and the associated idea of the Superblocks. Let's all give Salvador a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to be with you in Wellington from Barcelona. I would like to thank the ambassador, the university, and for allowing Urban Hub in New Zealand, allowing us to include a reflection on the cities that, in my opinion, urgently, very urgently require development in our current times, particularly given the impacts and the uncertainties that we're facing at the moment. To start, I am going to share my screen and reflect a little bit as quickly as possible because I have a lot to say. But today I'm going to focus mainly on the superblocks within ecosystemic urbanism. I'm going to focus particularly on superblocks as the basis of the model of mobility and public space. At some stage I will also talk about it as the basis of the new urbanism that I have called ecosystemic urbanism. Briefly, here we have the map of Barcelona in red. We have the road network, the space that is dedicated to mobility. 85% of that space is currently devoted to traffic, particularly automobile traffic. This means that practically all we can do is move through the city. Public space is managed by the local police, and essentially what they are managing is the right to movement and little else. This is the reality in Barcelona, where we can see that everything, that 85% is linked to automobile traffic. If we want to change the way those spaces are used, we need to change the current mobility model. This is the proposal approved by the plenary session of Barcelona City Council, based on superblocks, where we will free up practically 30% of the space that today is dedicated to mobility. And we're going to do this without compromising, without putting at risk the functioning and the organization of the city, given that we can free up 70% of the space simply by reducing traffic by just 15%. With 15% less traffic, we achieve similar traffic service in the city to current traffic service. That is, the speeds in on these routes in red will be similar to those in the current situation. So this is the proposal for Barcelona, and as you will see, we will define a similar scenario to transform cities throughout the world, because this is the model, as far as I can see, it's the most efficient model known to us at the moment in terms of freeing up space compared to the number of vehicles that you need to reduce to achieve it. Like in Barcelona, a proposal was made in Madrid and was approved by the Committee for the Reconstruction of the City of Madrid during the pandemic. It's a proposal of superblocks that we defined in the Madrid Center project. Within the black lines, you have about 2 million people living. And this is the same, but for the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz in northern Spain. And this will almost certainly be the first city to have the superblocks implemented throughout the municipality. This is the same idea, but in green, what we can see is everything that's freed up. And this is the same for the case of A Coruña or for Cordoba or Malaga. Here we have the current situation on the left, and the right-hand side is the proposal for the superblocks. And we have this for different places in the world, like Asunción in Paraguay, Buenos Aires, or Bogota, or Quito. So this is the current situation. And this is here we have the situation we want to get to using the Superblocks proposal. So what you can see here are morphology cells that define the different superblocks based on the morphology of each place. In fact, we can talk about superblocks constituting a model. It's a model because it can be repeated in other places in the world, and why not in Wellington? Now we'll see what the aim of this proposal is. Here on the left you see the current model, where in each section of each street is dedicated to mobility, as we said before. The consequences, the dysfunctions that are generated with the current model, well, there is no other sector that generates more dysfunctions than mobility, whether due to the mass occupation of space, the number of accidents, CO2 emissions, noise pollution, air pollution, even the visual intrusion and the deterioration of urban landscape. All of this is related to the mobility model. And if we want to change this, like I said before, we need a new mobility model. What model? Well, the model you have on the right, which is the Superblock model. What it proposes is first freeing up as much space, as much public space as possible that is today related to mobility. And to do this without breaking anything, ensuring the organization and the functioning of the city. So as I said before, if I can free up 70% of public space by reducing traffic by just 15%, the equation is almost magical. And the aim of this model is to reduce dysfunctions due to occupation of space, in this case 70%, to reduce air pollution, reduce noise, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, accidents. There'll be practically zero deaths, etc., etc. So what we're looking for is a solution, a comprehensive solution, integrated solution based on the transformation of the mobility model, which will allow us to have a new model of public space. As I said before, in blue, I've marked out some of the superblocks of the proposal for Barcelona so that you can see that the sizes of these superblocks are determined by a particular morphology, by the topography of the city, and by the function of each of the thoroughfares, so that we can finally be able to resolve the definition of the model. The model is the network that will be provided by many of the urban cells inside it. There's something that I think is very important to say, because many of those listening will be asking, all right, but what about the people who live in the perimeter of the superblocks, of the area defined by the superblocks? Will they be living in worse conditions? I have to say that with 15% less traffic, we achieve environmental conditions in the perimeter streets to be similar to those of the current situation. But the Barcelona mobility plan wants to reduce cars not by 15%, but by 21%, which represents the environmental conditions in the streets set out by the perimeter of the superblocks. Will be better in terms of air pollution, noise, environmental conditions in general. The Superblock proposal has two major areas. The first is the networks. So we define spaces through which to move to connect some points with others in the city. On the top left of the screen, you have the Superblock proposal. On the top right, you have the new network of buses that I myself designed for the city of Barcelona. And on the bottom left, you have the network of cycle lanes that connects all parts of the city. And on the bottom right, you have the integration of all the networks, including those related to urban green. So we integrate everything in these perimeter thoroughfares except the green network, which will be developed inside in the interior of the superblocks. So this is the drawing that I did in 2002 for the definition of the new network of buses, the new orthogonal network. This network has already been built. Implementation was completed in 2018. And I can say that I was looking, because I'm also a psychologist, and all my projects first look at how people behave in relation to the proposals that we're making or putting forward. Here, the idea was, with the same number of buses, to achieve waiting times at bus stops that were as short as possible. In fact, the human brain begins to have the feeling of waiting when the waiting time exceeds 2 minutes. So under 2 minutes, it's as if you weren't waiting. So we need to look for a network where the frequencies, well, the frequencies are around 4 minutes, so that the waiting times are 2 minutes, so people don't have the feeling that they're waiting. And this allows you to multiply the number of users of the new network. In fact, before the pandemic, the percentage of users, the increase in users, was more than 15%, and that's many millions of people, of new users. In the case of Vitoria-Gasteiz, we implemented the new network with these criteria, and the percentage of users from 2009 was more than 100% new users with the new network. And also we have the bicycle network. So we're looking for an interconnection, intermodality between modes of transport. When somebody asks me in Barcelona, what is the vehicle of the future for the city of Barcelona? The electric vehicle, I say the electric bicycle. The electric bicycle in a city arrives at its destination before a car when the distances are under 11 kilometers. So I'll get there more quickly on the bicycle than by car. And the energy I need to reach my destination, to do that journey, is less even than the energy that I'd use to do the journey on foot. So the sum of the metabolic energy plus the energy of the bicycle motor is less than the metabolic energy that I need to do the same journey on foot. This is the outline of the superblocks. On the left, you have the current situation. On the right, what you see is in black, the thoroughfares that will connect one point of the city to another. The thoroughfares basically dedicated to movement. But inside, we're going to have a new concept. We're going to include a new concept, which is these are the routes for communication, for the change of uses. So the proposal is very flexible, because what happens, if you can see my mouse pointer, if I go along this street and I want to go in, I can, but a loop system will allow me to enter, to connect with all the different facades, but it'll take me out behind where I went in the first place. And I can do the same thing in each one of the streets. You see? So I have access to all the facades, but I can't cross through them with the car. The car can't cross the superblock, and that's the key. So you can get to your destination if your destination is inside the superblock, but you cannot cross it. And as a result, 95% of the trips that used to be made in this area just stop happening because the destination is not inside the superblock. So it's stupid to go in, because they're not going to allow you to cross it if your destination isn't inside. On the other hand, pedestrians and cyclists can cross it in both directions. And there's also a key restriction to all this, which is that the speed inside the superblocks cannot exceed 10 kilometers per hour. To make it compatible with all the uses and rights of citizens. So we're trying to achieve that a person who can't see, a blind person, could walk along the middle of the street without fear. When we propose mobility solutions at 30 kilometers an hour, 30 kilometers an hour means that out of every 100 accidents between a person on foot and a car, 5 of those people will die. So it's not compatible with the street being, used by a child playing with a ball or on a bicycle. As I said, on the left we have the thoroughfares in red for circulation, for movement, in green on the right-hand side for communication. So 70% of the space is freed up for contact between people. But perhaps the most radical thing about the proposal, and when I say radical, I mean going to the root. And this is that at this moment, planners, the maximum aspiration of planners is to transform urban fabric into pedestrian fabric, pedestrian areas, without realizing that a pedestrian is just another mode of transport. What we are looking for is to go from pedestrians to citizens. A citizen is something more than a mode of transport. It's somebody who, as you'll see later, carries out and exercises a whole series of rights that they maybe now can't. And this is the situation of Barcelona, where almost 16%, painted here in blue, is dedicated to pedestrian spaces. So we have the current situation on the left. We're always talking about mobility, but when we talk about transforming public space today, we're still thinking just about mobility. What do we do with bikes? What do we do with pedestrians? What do we do with public transport? What do we do with cars? And no, what we're proposing is the system on the right-hand side, and that is that the interior of the superblocks, as well as the right to movement, you can exercise other citizens' rights related to entertainment, leisure, exchange, interchange of markets, culture, art, knowledge, and the consideration of public space as an agora, a space in which to develop democracy, democratic expression in all its senses, as well as the right to movement, if possibly, and particularly movement on foot or by bicycle in active modes. This is the arrival of the Superblock proposal. So think about where we've come from and look at where we want to get to. This really is the biggest recycling project in the world, because we're freeing up practically 7 million square meters, and without tearing down a single building. It's very cheap to do this in Barcelona with tactical urbanism proposals. Has an investment cost of around 300 million euros. It's practically nothing. If we did this over 4 years, the budget this year for Barcelona City Council was 3.3 billion. So in 4 years, it would be 13.2 billion euros. So 300 million wouldn't even be 2% of that budget. And we would change everything. This is the result of tactical urbanism in some points of the city that have already been turned into superblocks, all right? All of this beforehand was full of cars. I'm going to go through it quickly because I want to explain more things. This is also tactical. In this case, you can see some sitting warriors, statues of sitting warriors. These are sculptures gifted by a museum which is just behind those sculptures, gifted to the city so that they could use it in public space. And this is provisional. Like when it's finished, it'll be much more pretty than this. This is the case of a solution in Vitoria. And here you can see neutral colors. Black, the white, you know, that aims to imitate a zebra crossing that people understand very, very easily. So it gives the impression that they're in a pacified area, in a place which is designed for pedestrians, for people on foot, or for people who are going to occupy the pacified space. Or in the case of Barcelona, these green points that you see on the Cerdà expansion, these are future squares. Today they're intersections, like the ones I showed you before in the first and second photograph, where you see a kind of octagon full of asphalt. But look what we can do if we carry out the Superblock proposal. And I insist, without tearing down a single building, we can achieve 163 new squares like this. You see? That's a living space. It costs very little. These are all recycled materials. It's a 2,000 square meter square, where in a standard superblock you'd have 4 squares of this type. So almost 1 hectare near your home. I mean, it's unthinkable before, a project like the Superblock project. This is another one with a more structural, more finished urbanism, and in the end, you end up with a green network like the one you see here. In the case of Vitoria-Gasteiz, we have this new network where we're already working on 2/3 of the city to transform it into superblocks. But one of the elements we're looking for, as I put forward in the definition of the model, is improving habitability. So reduction of the dysfunctions that we suffer from the current mobility model. So what you see here, you can read this in the Environment International Elsevier journal. This is where we did some research between one of the biggest epidemiological teams in the world, together with different European and American universities, as well as the Urban Ecology Agency of Barcelona. So in Barcelona, we were able to prevent 667 premature deaths just by implementing the Superblock model. That's 291 due to air pollution, 163 due to noise pollution, 117 due to high temperatures, heat, etc., etc. So it's irresponsible not to put forward projects of this type, because people are dying, and they're not just dying, but there are problems of morbidity, health problems, and these include 18,700 asthma attacks, 12,100 cases of acute bronchitis, 600 admissions to hospital with cardiovascular problems. So all of this could be avoided or prevented with the Superblocks proposal. And in economic terms, we're talking about a saving of 1.7 billion euro. This, for example, is a snapshot of air pollution. On the left, you have the current situation, where 56% of the population are living in an area or in areas with levels of air pollution, nitrogen dioxide in this case, below 40 micrograms per cubic meter. So these are acceptable levels. Now, this means that 44% of the population is not living in a place where air quality is sufficient. Now, with the Superblocks, on the other hand, only 6% would be living in a space with unacceptable air quality, and 94% would. In the case of noise pollution, it's not quite as spectacular, but the data are similar. In this case, 75% of the population would have noise levels below 65 decibels, which means that two people talking 1 meter apart would be able to communicate 100% of what they're saying in an intelligible manner without needing to raise their voice, without shouting. And temperatures as well, the heat island effect. At the moment, we have 96 nights with temperatures all night above 20 degrees centigrade, and 21 above 25 degrees. That's insane. Many people die, vulnerable people, the elderly, people with respiratory or cardiovascular problems, and children have severe problems, and some of them die. Another element of the Superblocks is the possibility of rewilding the city. On the left, we have a diagram showing the low biodiversity, particularly the trees. But on the right-hand side, by incorporating the public space that we can wild, that we can make green to a certain extent inside the Superblocks and on roofs. So we propose having 30% of rooftops occupied by urban green. So we would develop a green carpet on rooftops, which would allow us to reduce the temperature by between 3 and 4 degrees and reduce the heat island effect. And this increase in temperatures caused by the heat waves due to climate change. This is the simulation. On the left-hand side, we have the current situation. On the right, we have the Superblock situation. So this is the surface temperature of materials. And on the right, with our proposals, in terms of permeability, including several green layers, and this green carpet we were talking about just now, In the end, temperatures will be reduced and the temperature of materials is reduced. And then there's the emission of CO2, of greenhouse gases. So this is the example of Vitoria. We could reduce those emissions by 33% with the superblocks in the mobility plan proposed for the city of Vitoria. So we would be within the agreements that cities have to abide by to get their emissions below certain limits. Another fundamental element that is part of the Superblock proposal and of the compact and complex city model, which is a model that was approved at the Quito Summit, the UN Habitat Summit. That's a model that, in a way, I proposed, and United Nations has taken it on board. And it's a model of a city that's compact in its morphology, complex in its organization. There's a high mix of uses, and it is also metabolically efficient and socially cohesive. So I'm going to focus for a bit on the idea of proximity, or following the idea of the 15-minute city, which was put forward in Paris. Well, we've been working on this idea since 2000. Now, proximity of activities and services. This is the geolocation of the different legal entities, institutions, organizations, activities, associations, anything that's organized in a city. In part of Barcelona. This is the same thing, but magnified. And what I'm going to do is transform these orange dots into icons in ideograms. So, or similar to Japanese or Chinese language. What we're going to achieve here is a message about that area. A message where I can measure the level of information in that message based on information theory. Similar to the way you measure biodiversity, I can measure diversity and therefore the level of complexity of urban organization using that theory. So this is using the Shannon and Weaver formula, which is the measure of entropy, to measure the information contained in the message we talked about just now. And we have developed a dictionary in order to read the city, a dictionary of more than 2,000 words, which allows us to create messages and understand the level of centrality of each piece, the level of maturity, etc. Okay, so this then gets turned into maps like the one you can see here, this map of Barcelona, where you can see the levels of diversity and therefore the levels of organizational complexity and centrality. This is the same, but with density of activities. And here we are beginning to set out what is the 15-minute city. Now, this isn't the 15-minute city, this is the 5-minute city, because in dark green, what you have is coverage of activities, simultaneous daily activities, less than 300 meters from your home, so less than 5 minutes away. So less than 5 minutes away, what's in dark green, you have a minimum of 6 daily activities simultaneously. So practically the entire city is in this situation. Less than 5 minutes away, we have more than 6 basic activities around us. But we also have the same thing for public facilities. Not as much by the looks of it, right? But these are just the facilities, the basic facilities. So in this case, 5 types of facility: culture, education, sports, healthcare, etc. These are public. But when we add public and private facilities together, we get a map that looks like this. So we have everything very, very close to home. But the same can't be said of urban green, and this is our handicap. This is why this is the strength of the superblocks, allowing us to renaturalize public space. which is currently occupied by mobility and motor car traffic. So we can use that freed up space partly for urban green space, or in this case, coverage by public transport with 3 modes, whether it's train, metro, or bus. Green means that I've got all 3 modes. Yellow means I've got 2. Okay. So to finish with the Barcelona part, I'll say that the basis of the development of ecosystemic urbanism is superblocks, because ecosystemic urbanism defines 15 principles that are linked to the model that we've talked about before: the compact in morphology, complex in organization, metabolically efficient, and socially cohesive. This model is filled with content based on 15 principles. The first 5 linked to compactness and functionality are in red and orange. The next 3 have to do with complexity, with organization. There are 2 types of organization in the city: those that have to do with human activities and those that have to do with living species. Then we have 3 more principles that are linked to metabolism, to energy, water, and materials. What we're looking for is the city to be as self-sufficient as possible with nearby and renewable resources. Then we have a principle directly linked to adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, which feeds off the metabolic principles and other principles, just urban green space. And then we have 3 more which have to do with social cohesion. How do we achieve social mixes in terms of income, ethnicity, ages in the same place, so that there is coexistence and there isn't social exclusion? Or how do we define what type of buildings, what kind of universal housing can we have, or universal housing for everybody, sustainable buildings? And then finally, habitability also has to do with the existence of facilities, the right facilities, and at the right distance. So the superblocks incorporate most of the principles inside them. They integrate it. It's almost as if it was a small city. It acts as if it were a fractal that reproduces itself all over the city. So if you put forward a proposal for densifying the centre of Wellington, think that each of the superblocks that we're going to propose have to incorporate all the pieces in all senses: energy, biodiversity, accessibility, habitability, and social cohesion. All those elements have to be there incorporated in this. Can it be done? Yes. Should it be done? Yes. If we want to seriously deal with the dysfunctions and impacts and major challenges that we're facing today, especially those associated with climate change. In the superblocks, in ecosystemic urbanism, we work on 3 levels. 1, at a height on rooftops, 2, on the surface, and 3, underground. So we need to link all 3 if we want all variables to be integrated, so that we can take on the major challenges facing humanity and to have cities that will be responsible for their current impact. So let's have a look at Wellington very quickly, because I don't want you to think that, well, look, I've studied it a bit, and the people from Urban Hub have done an excellent job, as you'll be able to see. Here we are looking at Greater Wellington. You have these proportions of population basically centered around 4 areas in 4 cities. Those 542,000 people are distributed, as you see here, so that almost 40% live in in Wellington. That's your reality. It's a different reality to ours in terms of morphology and the functionality of the system, but there are other parts that are more similar to European cities, like the centre of Wellington. And this is what I want you to see. Here you see black lines where the different populated parts of the region approach each other through these two big motorways, which, like a river, becomes filled with content, and the breadth of the river gets increasingly bigger. And of course, where do they end up? Well, they end up naturally in a car park. So it's very easy to understand the mobility model of Greater Wellington. It's a radial system that is fed by the different urbanized areas, which feed that huge big central trunk, that flow that comes through the two motorways that come together right in the center. As Cerda said, that is crazy. Cerda wanted his network to be orthogonal, so that there wasn't a center, so that it was all distributed isomorphically, with the intention of, as we've just seen, the different tributaries of a river come together, increasing the flow of the river, making it bigger and bigger until it gets to the center. But the paradox is that when it gets to the center, the flow is so big that the center doesn't exist, and that's what you have here. It's just full of cars. We use most of the space in order to park the cars, like as a car park. This is the traffic data, and you can see that we have a problem, which is not a small one in terms of congestion. The colors, the yellow and red, give us an idea of how, on a normal day, at peak traffic time, the system works in Wellington and its area of influence, its catchment area. On the other hand, public transport follows a similar route, not as well developed, but similar to what we've seen for motor vehicles. But what happens here is also a problem of congestion and saturation of those networks. So many people just give up, among other reasons, because here, what I've marked in green, this is where you have more than 35 minutes journey time in train. 35 minutes psychologically is the maximum time. As soon as you go over 35 minutes, people are going to choose another form of transport, another alternative mode of transport, and in this case it's normally the car, you see. So in green we have journey times in excess of 35 minutes, in yellow in excess of 25 minutes. So to be able to get to the train station or the bus, they'll take more than 5 minutes from the central station to the destination. So that journey ends up being an hour and a half, or even 2 hours, and that is unacceptable because it really reduces the quality of life, people's quality of life. And this, I think, is something that we just can't do that. This is the same setup, but with the values where you can see the average journey times at peak time give us this type of picture. Well, you can see, right? In the end, the modal distribution is a model essentially based on private vehicles. Here you have it on the left. Kapiti Coast District, you have 68% of journeys being done by car. Aotearoa, 72%. Upper Hutt City, 71%. In Wellington City, 45%. Now here the numbers have come down, but it's still 45%. Later on, I'll show you the percentages in Barcelona. But on the other hand, public transport and alternative transport modes, so on foot and by bike, it's 44%. 8% work from home, and so they don't need to move. So we have numbers here where the mobility model, understanding the model as the percentage of journeys for every mode of transport, is strongly biased towards the use of the car. And here you can see it by areas. Again, it's the car setting the pace. It's the car used for the highest percentage of trips. In Barcelona, however, look at the internal movement in Barcelona. 16% of trips are carried out in private cars. Only 16%. 30% is in public transport, and 53% is active mobility, so on foot or by bicycle. In Zone 1 of the metropolitan area, the 26 municipalities nearest to the city, this percentage increases to 31%, and public transport is 19%, active mobility is 50%. Now, when we go to to Zone 2, that's 139 municipalities. Now we're getting close. Look at this. We're getting close to similar percentages to those in the case of Wellington. You see? So Zone 2, the suburban area of Barcelona, suburban to Barcelona, in the metropolitan area, has similar percentages of journeys to Wellington by car. Public transport looks like this. The values are very similar, as you can see. Perhaps it's even a little bit better for Zone 2, because we're talking about almost 50% in public transport and active mobility. But the plan put forward for Greater Wellington's, it's very good, because it's talking about the need to densify the nodes, densify the main points of attraction, which are bus stations. So it's looking at fare integration in the different modes of transport. It's looking at reorganizing the transport network, because it's necessary. I think that a lot of work needs to be done to turn the situation around for Greater Wellington. They're going in the right direction here, but I think we need to look for a way to integrate all the parts at the same time, urbanistic parts as well, not just mobility. So going now into central Wellington, as we saw before, the area, the green area, and the car parking area, so you can see how the space is distributed and what the centre of Wellington is designed for. I think you can afford this. Now, we have a Superblock proposal that looks like this. So through the thoroughfares marked out in red, the perimeter thoroughfares, these would be devoted to circulation, traffic circulation, but at 30 kilometers per hour. 30 kilometers per hour along the perimeter. Inside, it would be 10 kilometers per hour, okay? Except for the main arteries, where depending, they would be either 50 kilometers per hour or 80 kilometers an hour. This would be the green space that we could achieve. We could regreen nearly all of it. Well, of course we could, if we change the uses of that public space, which is what you have to do. So here you also have a proposal for redensifying the city centre in order to regenerate the fabric that right now is just essentially for commuting, for work, and for shopping on weekends. But for little else. No, you need to create a city, and to do this, we're all agreed in that the density is a key element. We need to study this carefully to see what kind of balance we'd have with the ecosystemic urbanism certificate that we've developed. But it's good. The ideas are going in the right direction, the direction we think is the right direction. Okay. So then here we have partial information on the uses, but we would need to look for greater detail to see how they could be changed, how to multiply the number and diversity of legal entities, of activities in Wellington, particularly in central Wellington, and in the central areas, the nodes of the different centralities of the different municipalities, in order to come up with a proposal for a territorial model, a potent model of a multi-center territory that would make it possible to reduce the number of journeys, reduce travel times, and to improve urban quality, and above all, the quality of life of the inhabitants of Wellington and the metropolitan area. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salvador, for a very inspiring presentation. I'm not going to say too much. So we now have enough time for three questions from the audience in this room, and three questions from the international online audience. So if you wish to ask a question, click on the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type the question into the space on the bottom right-hand corner of the window. And Leandra and myself will take questions from the floor whilst Ivan selects the online questions. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You mentioned that you designed a new bus network for Barcelona, which was implemented sometime before the full Superblock proposal. Do you think it's instrumental to improve public transport in a city like Wellington in order to be able to implement something like the Superblock proposal that you have, Urban Hub have put forward for Wellington?
Yes. In fact, the public transport network is what allowed us to define the perimeter of the superblocks. The Superblock proposal has a prior element in order to get the commercial speed and the efficiency and frequencies of the new network are the best possible. So we have to try and ensure that the specialized thoroughfares are specifically designed to accommodate public transport. That has to be prior, and that's the key. And in fact, I proposed the first Superblock in 1993. It was implemented. I made the proposal in 1987. So a lot has happened since then. A lot of time's gone by, but the projects in cities, as you know, have big timescales. They're almost not human. They're longer. Anyway, you need to have a lot of patience and wait for the right time. But yes, the answer is that the public transport network is the first element you need to work on.
Second question. Yeah.
Kia ora, Salvador. Muchas gracias for your presentation. Thank you very much. And also thank you to our translator, who I think was doing an amazing job. My question just relates to one of the points you raised, Salvador, regarding the 15% traffic reduction. Is that something that is a result of the Superblock configuration, or is that something that is a precursor to developing the Superblock structure? I just wasn't quite sure.
Well, no, the proposal of reducing by 15% is a result of the simulations carried out with current traffic. So it was, what percentage of vehicles should we reduce in order to achieve the same level of service, of traffic service as at present? So to have similar speeds. So just by iteration, we're looking in the model, the greatest efficiency that we can get, as I said, freeing up space, but reducing traffic as little as possible so that it's not a problem. It's not a traffic problem. Superblocks wouldn't work if the solution was to collapse the city. We don't collapse it. We don't have a problem with traffic. We don't have a problem of investment. So normally the problem is mental in terms of lifestyles and political, but not from the perspective of the technical or economic perspective. In fact, when I proposed Superblocks in 1987, at that time, we didn't have the simulators we have today. So at that time, I was managing the technical environmental services of Barcelona City Council, and I went to see my colleagues in the transport department with the Superblocks proposal to resolve the noise problem in the city. And they asked me, look, how much is this going to collapse the city? And I wasn't able to answer them. So they said, look, you can leave the way you came. And so until I was unable to say exactly what percentage of vehicles I need to cut down, the proposal didn't go anywhere.
Hola, Salvador. Muchas gracias. Really enjoyed your presentation. I was particularly interested in your point about moving from centering on pedestrians to centering on citizens. How important do you think that shift is? It seems like quite a, especially when you think transport, it's quite a significant mind shift.
Well, if you ask me, what's a city? I will tell you that for a city to exist, there must be public space, and at the same time, you need to have a sufficient number of legal entities implemented in that space. Those two elements are the key, because we could have a space with housing, with single family houses, like in the suburbs, and we have roads and streets going around those houses, but that's not a city. That's urbanization, which is different. It's urbanized space. It's not public space. For public space to exist, there has to be a critical mass of population and activities at the same time. There needs to be conflict of interest in those spaces. And then you have the municipality, which is normally who makes the different interests compatible. It makes them compatible. So you need to think that the key to the city is public space. Furthermore, it's what makes the city, and it's what makes us citizens. A citizen is a citizen when he or she can exercise all their rights in that city. Okay? That's a first order theoretical question. You really need to understand this. So for me, public space is sacred. It can't just be used exclusively for mobility, and even less for four-wheel mobility. in time, future generations will say that we were crazy. In the same way that today, when we talk about the Middle Ages, when people threw urine out the window, we you know, that for us is unthinkable today. But it's exactly the same thing.
Muchas gracias, Salvador. Thank you so much for your really detailed discussion of what is several decades of work, starting in, well, maybe starting before 87, but you mentioned 1987 as being a time where you invented part of this. I don't want to call it a formula, but this innovation. Now, my question pertains primarily to the information you might have gathered in those decades on the relationship between morphology and topography. So the city of Barcelona, as we know, is relatively flat. Also, your study area in Aotearoa, Wellington, is relatively flat, but much of Wellington is not. And I'm just wondering what you might have to say, just in general, or specifically around topography and urban form and transport. Thank you.
Well, in the case of Barcelona, it appears flat, but it isn't. It has 7 hills. It has an irregular topography. It has its lower part closer to the sea, which is flat. But the city has developed and expanded into topographies that are not exactly flat with slopes. They're not inconsiderable. So, like in the case of Wellington, you need to start with the flat areas because, you know, and why not the central parts of the municipalities of the Greater Wellington. So, I think the Superblock approach can, of course, begin in the flatter areas, but not just in those areas, because at the end, what you want to achieve are lower levels of noise pollution, of air pollution, and all this depends on how you articulate traffic in each of the areas. It's not exclusive, and it shouldn't be, you know, be exclusive to flat areas. It's easier. We're applying it in different topographies. But the Superblock proposal, as you have seen, it's a comprehensive approach. We need the mobility model to adapt to this idea. We can transform, because it's urgent to do so, the current modal distributions. We need to shift part of the population who today uses the car to other modes. Now, do we need to improve those other modes? Yes, of course. But first, by redesigning the network. Secondly, by making them more comfortable. And third, making it possible to reduce journey times, etc., etc. So all the parts that can, all the pieces that can make these journey times shorter and can, when you do the comparative analysis, reduce pollution concentrations, noise, greenhouse gases, basically because you're reducing energy consumption.
That's the questions from the floor. So, Ivan.
Yeah, so we have a question here from Dr. Suva Chowdhury. He says the presented Superblock strategies will be effective for denser cities. Do you think that the low density cities can become medium density cities by adapting the reverse mechanism of your suggested strategies? Sorry.
Yes. Yes. In fact, for a while, I thought that the proposal, the Superblock proposal, would be essentially limited to dense areas. But after 2 projects where I had the opportunity for a thorough discussion in the suburbs of Vancouver, we were able to find formulas for re-densifying certain areas that allowed for decentralization processes for those areas that in many cases involved travel times of 2 hours. So it was worth thinking about how to generate a city where this didn't occur. So to have minimum densities that would allow you to have the daily activities and workplaces in sufficient number so that a percentage of the population could have shorter commuting times. I'm committed to this. I think that the proposal of the plan for Greater Wellington is well articulated. I think the idea of redensifying, particularly the main attraction points, which are the train stations, I think that's where you should start.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Celia Wade-Brown. How similar are the superblocks to what was done in Amsterdam in the 90s, making journeys direct by car, than for walking, cycling, and public transport?
Right. Well, the Superblock proposal, one thing about it is that it has undergone an evolution of proposals that have been put forward in other places, perhaps not in as much depth as what I believe is going on in Barcelona, because most of them always focused on traffic, on mobility. And in this case, what we're doing is completely changing the sense of it. That's why I said that the most radical thing about this was moving from the pedestrian to the citizen. That is radical because that goes straight to the heart of the essence of public space, of what makes us citizens, not what just makes us pedestrians. So proposals about perimeters, urban perimeters that take in several blocks have been around for quite some time. Indeed, Cerdá himself proposed a modification to the plan approved in 1859 to one in 1863, where in order to be able to include the railway system, he proposed a 2x2 superblock, which four blocks, in order to integrate the rail system. Then Le Corbusier in Chandigarh put forward a proposal of 800 by 1200 meters. I'd been there. The solution has a lot of dysfunctions. Now, in Barcelona, there was a proposal of 400 by 400 where the perimeter was for traffic. The function of traffic was one of the four functions of the modern movement. Even authors like Uriol Boigas and Antonio Bonet in Buenos Aires were looking at the possibility of rethinking the Cerdá plan by incorporating the idea of the superblock as an evolution of his plan. You need to think that the key element for the reformulation of mobility in a city, something that planners, and I don't know why, have not done, but it's one of the big mistakes of our cities. They've incorporated motor traffic in the same places where people used to travel on foot or where there's animal interaction. So what they've done, they've used all parts of all streets. That's the big mistake. Why? Because it's a problem of mental times. Cities were designed for movement on foot at speeds of 4 or 5 kilometers an hour. So going round a block on foot is different from going around a block in a car, because the speed of the car is at least 5 times higher, which means that the times for going around a block on foot in a superblock in car is similar. So going around a superblock by car is a similar time, takes a similar time to going round one block on foot. It means we're adapting the characteristics of the car to movement within the city. It's stupid to take up all sections, all parts of all streets with cars, because they go much faster. The mental time involved in going around the superblock is a similar mental time to that of going around one block on foot. If we had superblocks of 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers and a perimeter going in only one direction, that would mean that if you miss your destination, you're going to have to do 8 kilometers to get back to your starting point again. And this mentally isn't acceptable, but 400 or 500 meters is acceptable. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Salvador. The last question will be Aries asking, why is density so important for the idea of the superblocks?
Well, because the idea of density is what makes a city. So what we need to aim for is not to do urbanization. The other day in a conference that I gave in the College of Civil Engineers in Spain, somebody asked me, what do we have to do? And I said, look, don't build any more single family dwellings. Like, the world won't take it. So we need to be able to turn things around. We need to be able to make cities in which we can live together, where services are nearby, where we can get places on foot. When I move on foot, the energy, the potential energy I need to do that journey is equivalent to a domestic 150 watt light bulb. To do that same journey in a private car, I need 6,000 times more energy. And I need to do this with fossil based energy. And this is where the problem lies. This is where climate change comes in. This is where disaster lies. Think, and I'm going to get serious now, that what I'm talking about is it's urgent. We've got very limited time to turn this situation around, and it begins with the mobility of our city. Have no doubt about it, and our lifestyles.
Well, thank you to all those who volunteered questions. And so just to close the evening, I would like to thank the following people: the Spanish ambassador, Fernando Koutou, and the Spanish embassy for their wonderful support. Luis Redondo, the deputy head of mission from the Spanish embassy, the dean of the faculty, Mark Aurel Schnabel, and the head of the School of Architecture, Andre Brown, Leandro and Ivan from Urban Hub for being the brains and the brawn behind the whole thing. Carlos Elmoina for my colleague who was the MC in the atrium and drove the whole organization of the event from our side. Liam, who I can't believe somehow translated. That's just phenomenal. Zach, I think he's the hardest working man in showbiz or something like that. Moana Poynton, who's our fabulous administrator. Richard Hallam, who from Digital Solutions at VUW, for researching how to do simultaneous translations in Zoom, because they haven't done it before at Vic. What's that, sorry? Oh, all right. Liam's in the script. Cool. Go, Liam. That's it.
Gracias, Liam. Gracias.
Then Richard did the work to make simultaneous translation available to Zoom to VW, and now it's available to everyone else. Another very amazing person is Kiri Hewitt behind the desk over there, who immediately made us made what seemed to be impossible thing actually work. We were just, I think we were beside ourselves with just nerves. And he's just very assured and very relaxed, and it just made us feel really relaxed. And also for guiding us through tonight too, fairly seamlessly. Richard Benge, a seasoned sort of MC, for his very wise guidance about such events and for his photography. Nacho Poli from Urban Hub Barcelona, Guim, is that how you say Guim? Guim Costa, also from Urban Hub Barcelona, is also the president of the Architects Association of Catalonia. Rubian Rafael from the Spanish Embassy for providing delicious Spanish foods and wines. I only had one glass. But Mark Shaw, our Technical Services Manager, for bookings and help, the security personnel in the building, and also the following organisations for promoting the event. VUW, communityscoop.co.nz, the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects, the New Zealand Institute of Architects, and the Urban Design Forum. So could you all put your hands together to show your appreciation for this amazing team? One last thing is that Ivan and Leandro from Urban Hub will be in the atrium after this if you would like to ask any further questions or talk to them about anything you can catch them there. You can also find their contact details on most of the promotional material and the registration site, or through the Urban Hub Aotearoa website. It's been a joy to watch this all unfold and without too many glitches. And thank you and safe travels tonight. Nora, do you want to say something? Oh, okay. Well, I'll let him say something.
Thank you, Peter Connolly.
So yeah, Norea, Tenakoto, 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 Katoa.